Well, hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Scottish Wildlife Trust's what is now our third online AGM. Our technology has worked well on previous occasions, so we're hoping that we'll have an equally good event today. I'm really pleased so many people have registered, and we've had 100 people registering to join us today. So that's an excellent sign of the support that the Trust have amongst our membership. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the sad death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth and take a few moments for us to pay our respects. The Scottish Wildlife Trust has benefited from the support of the royal family through the patronage of Prince Charles, the Duke of Rothesay, over many decades. And we've been very grateful for that support. The passing of the Queen is both a very sad and also a very momentous event. And it is something which I think is affecting us all at the moment. So we just take a few moments to pause and pay our respects. And now I'm going to ask Ruchia Shah, our Director of External Affairs, to run through the housekeeping matters and outline the different ways in which you can interact with this platform as we move into the formal part of our meeting.
Thank you, Linda, and hello all. Most importantly, I must draw your attention to the fact that this event is being recorded. All participant cameras are off as this is a webinar. However, do be aware if you submit a question through the question and answer facility or comment in the chat that your name and what you have written will be seen on the recording. When it comes to the question and answer following the formal agenda, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens, the button which says Q&A. Staff have been assigned as technical support today, so if you have any issues, please use the chat function to seek support. Please do also engage with and use the chat function for any comments and observations throughout the meeting. However, please do not post any web links. But remember to use the Q&A function for questions during the question and answer, as this will help Linda to chair this session effectively. Thank you. Back to you, Linda.
So turning to the programme for today's event, we're going to start looking at some key wildlife highlights and then move into the formal agenda. There'll be an opportunity for some Q&A as part of that to our senior management team. We'll then take a break, so roughly just over an hour's time we'll take a break for 15 minutes. And then after the break, I'll be announcing the winners of the Trustees Award for volunteering, where we've had a very large number of very worthy nominations. And then we'll move on to a very special panel discussion, which is on the topic Peace with Nature. And I know we're all very much looking forward to that. And we aim to wind up at 12:45. So before we get into the formal business, we will have a small selection of some wonderful wildlife highlights to show you over the last year. Well, thanks to everyone for those wonderful images that have been, many of them sent in by supporters. And I think I loved the badges best. They were they were superb. But that just reminds us what it's all about. And it's wonderful to start off our AGM on such a positive note, showing the wonderful wildlife of Scotland. So I now like to formally welcome you to the 58th Annual General Meeting of the Scottish Wildlife Trust. The meeting is, as ever, the opportunity for the members to scrutinise the business of the Trust, to ask questions, to influence the governance of the charity, and to help us with setting the direction on the way forward. We've received several apologies which have been noted, but we now formally move to look at the minutes of the last AGM in 2021. These have been put online. It was held on the 11th of September last year. So people have had a chance to look at them. Does anyone want to put forward any corrections? I'm not seeing any signs of people looking for corrections. So could I then have a proposer that we accept the minutes as a tree record? And if you could use the chat box to put forward, if you would be happy to propose accepting the minutes. So would anyone like, people probably still trying to navigate their way to the chat box, but would anyone like to propose that we accept the minutes?
I can see Anthony Robson is proposing, Linda.
I can't see that, so that's helpful. So Anthony has proposed the minutes, and could we have a seconder?
And Stuart Smith is happy to second.
Thank you very much, Anthony and Stuart. So we now move to receive the Council's report and accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2022. So I'd like to just highlight some key achievements and comments on the last year as chair. For me, the last year has been as busy as ever, and we've had an extraordinary set of challenges. We had a number of extreme weather events that were challenging for our reserves, heat waves and extreme storm damage. We've had a bird flu outbreak, and we've had continuing challenges with COVID, which has been a challenge for all organisations in terms of maintaining activity and working through restrictions. I'm very proud that as a trust, we rose to the challenge and have delivered an enormous amount, which you'll hear more about soon, despite all these challenges. And I'd like to pay my personal tribute to Joe and the team and all the staff for their extremely hard work and dedication under often really quite challenging circumstances. In my role as chair, I've had oversight of the Conservation Committee, the Finance and Audit Committee, the Nominations Committee, and also I have seen the activities of local groups and Wildlife Watch. And my fellow trustees have been working extremely hard on all of these, and I'd like to pay my personal tribute to them for the support that they've given the trust and myself during the last year. Thank you all very, very much, and many of them are joining us today. So I now want to move to looking at some of the achievements, the highlight, just the highlights of the achievements of the Trust over the last year. And there have been many. So turning to look to some of the detail, we've been active in Edinburgh on Scotland's first nature network. Here we're working in collaboration with Edinburgh City Council, and we're identifying actions across the city to improve the urban environment. We've worked on the production of a map, which is available for any organisation who wants to take action for nature in the city. Looking at another part of Scotland, perhaps a more deprived part of Scotland, looking at Cumbernauld. We've been extremely active in community work in Cumbernauld. We were very proud that it was actually highlighted in the Scottish Parliament as one of the great community success stories in the environment in Scotland. Our work at Cumbernauld Living Landscape. We've been active in a huge area of Coigach and Assynt, where we've been bringing to sort of a culmination the work on the Living Landscape project, with 24 separate projects moving on. Here you've got a wonderful image of the Trustees Path, which is a beautiful and delightful walk to take, where we've managed to restore an ancient path to the benefit of local people and tourism in the area. But we've delivered a really substantial programme of work across a vast area in the northwest of Scotland. Turning to a rather smaller scale, we've been very active in looking at pollinator-friendly habitats in the Irvine and Girvan area. We've been extremely active at working through volunteers in this area, creating pollinator-friendly habitat at 40 sites with 80 volunteers involved in that work. Looking forward, we are developing as a major initiative the Riverwoods Partnership. The intention here is to create a network of thriving riverbank woodlands and healthy river systems right across Scotland. And as part of the work in initiating that, we have produced an engaging story map and secured funding to develop a sort of Readiness Pioneers project to help get this work off the ground. And this is a very exciting forthcoming area of activity for the Trust. Again, looking in detail at one of our reserves, in Lochardinning, we have planted more than 11,000 native trees, creating over 20 hectares of woodland habitat. Just one example of the work on our reserves. And looking at how nature is thriving in Scotland at the moment, or looking for the positives about where it is thriving, we were very pleased to see the first successful breeding of golden plovers since 2004 on the island of Eigg, and it's lovely to see the sustained work on Eigg over many decades, and seeing a nature positive coming from that. Turning to look at the more policy-focused work, we've been active on a quite detailed project in Orkney, applying the principles of natural capital assessment as part of the Living Seas project. The intention here is to underpin marine spatial plans by applying this methodology, and the work highlights the importance of sustaining fish populations and the need for more and better data sources on the marine environment to highlight this work. Again, one of our sites, we can highlight that we had a record year for butterflies, and we had our best year for a number of different species, including, I'm no butterfly expert, but the checkered skipper the small copper and the Scotch Argus butterfly, and it's great to hear of species improving on some of our sites. Turning to look at our work with people, a very successful initiative we've been working on over many years and have continued to extend is a new snorkel trail on the island of Arran, completing or adding to the existing snorkel trails that we've outlined. And again, those have been extremely successful at helping people to know how they can get to know and understand and interact with Scotland's wonderful marine environment. Our Red Squirrel project is again long-standing, and thinking strategically, we're trying to ensure that we can move on to the next phase. And we have been successful in that, in supporting 14 volunteer Red Squirrel groups to become independent. And that's part of our long-term strategy to move forward, so that we no longer maintain the same level of activity, but are able to manage with other partner bodies and groups. And we're very pleased at the success in moving that project on. And another long-standing species that we've been involved with is the beaver, and we've continued to play a key role in the development of the National Beaver Strategy. We actively participate in the Scottish Beaver Forum, and we're continuing to champion the role of the species and its importance as an ecosystem engineer for Scotland. We have continued a huge series of engagement activities, and we particularly want to highlight there our involvement with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra's Early Years programme. And through that, we've been able to make available nature engagement activities to every nursery and primary school in Scotland. Turning to slightly older children, we have grown our Wildlife Watch network. We now have 37 groups. Looking to our broader engagement, we've coordinated a wide range of online events. We've had record numbers. I think we're on the next slide. Yeah, thank you. We have had record numbers to our national webinars, and we carried those out in partnership with the local groups, and they were able to achieve very substantial numbers with people tuning in to take part in topics ranging from tracking skills to links reintroduction. We've also worked directly with young people who face barriers to employment through Earn Your Stripes, which is work that we've carried out together with Scottish Badgers. And again, highlighting something specific, in Ayrshire, we've provided over 2,400 people opportunities to engage with nature through a 3-year community engagement programme. On the policy side, we have campaigned for new legally binding nature targets, and we've been successful in that. And the Scottish Government has committed to a new natural environment bill. We're working closely with our partners in Scottish Environment Link on that. Our Young Leaders, which again has been a very successful initiative to engage with a new generation of folk in their late teens and early 20s, they produced a youth manifesto for action on climate change, which was published during COP26. And that included consultation with young people across the whole of the UK. So we're very pleased by that initiative from our Young Leaders. We grew the Nature Finance Pioneers Network, which is aiming to bring together individuals and businesses interested in exploring new methods of financing nature conservation in Scotland, which is a very interesting and significant development. We have supported over 950 volunteers and established conservation teams both in the Highlands and Dumfries and Galloway. And we reopened our visitor centres with COVID safe measures. This is the sort of measures that we put in place, and we did ensure that at the earliest opportunity, once the rules had been changed to allow this to happen, we wanted to welcome people back, but to ensure that they were safe, and the team and the staff worked really hard to achieve that. Fortunately, our sites no longer look like that, so we no longer have to follow these measures, but we now have a more normal visitor experience. We had thousands of comments from members when we consulted on our trust strategy for 2030, which was an extremely positive and constructive and helpful process. And that helped us capture our priorities for the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So we're really grateful for so many of you who chose to get involved in that process. And we were honoured to receive almost 1.1 million in legacy gifts throughout the year. And that has been extremely helpful over the more difficult situation over the last year or so. And we're very pleased that 12 supporters have said that they have included a gift in their will. And thank you for that. So I hope you agree that that is an extraordinary set of achievements in just 1 year across a huge range of activity, people, nature, processes, active volunteers, working with people, children, and across all walks of life in Scotland and all parts of Scotland. It's a huge achievement, and a huge thanks to our partners, to our funders, and most importantly, to our members and supporters. If we did not have that, then none of that would be possible. So thank you all so much for making this and so many more achievements possible. So having reviewed the year, we're now going to turn to another important theme for the AGM, which is the finance. And for that, I'd like to invite Susan Mackenzie, our Director of Finance and Resources, to summarise the financial position of the Trust.
Thank you, Linda. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. So the results for financial year ended 31st of March 2022. The pandemic impacted the Trust like so many other organisations, affecting many of our activities, as well as pausing our face-to-face recruitment work. So the financial results continue to be affected by this period. However, the Trust continues to be innovative, to work to improve our financial resilience and also to make the most very carefully of our strong financial reserve positions, which provide comfort, especially in these difficult economic times. And the charity entered 21-22 with a deficit budget, and this was reforecast during the year in light of notifications of generous income from wills and also increased income from mitigation payments relating to our wildlife reserves. Expenditure during the year was also curtailed slightly due to a combination of capacity issues and contractor availability. I reported to last year's AGM that membership numbers had fallen, and I'm pleased to report that membership grew again last year. Looking at the results themselves, in terms of income, just switched away from my screen. In terms of income, the Trust continues to be grateful for the support of our members through subscriptions and donations from individuals. We were also honoured to receive almost 1.1 million in legacy income during the financial year. Grant funders also continued to support the Trust, giving over £4 million in total. We continue to be supported very generously by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, People's Postcode Lottery, Esme Fairbairn, Nature Scots, and a large number of other generous funders. Overall, total charity income increased from 6.1 million to 7.6 million, bouncing back to the pre-COVID levels. Our people worked really hard to adapt and redoubled their efforts to deliver project outcomes following the restricted activity last year. And as a result, we saw restricted income recover from 2.6 million to 3.9 million in 21-22. Restricted income can and will only be used for the particular purposes specified by donors. Restricted income received in the year includes existing commitments such as Saving Scotland's red squirrels, the Coic and Ascent living landscape, living seas, oceans of value, creating natural connections in Cumbernauld, Edinburgh's thriving green spaces, and nature-based solutions, as well as a number of other project activities. We continue to shape succession planning for recent and existing projects and also innovate in order to achieve our longer-term aspirations and the vision as articulated through Strategy 2030. Turning to spend, total expenditure increased by 1.4 million to 7.1 million, indicative of that resumption of project activities during the year. Other movements included gains on investments, and changes in relation to the defined benefit pension scheme. In summary, the end result was an increase of 1.3 million against unrestricted reserves and a downward a downward movement of 83,000 in terms of restricted reserves. Our free funds are at the top of the target range set by Council, which guards against financial risk such as fluctuations in legacy income as well as other unexpected income or expenditure events. We continue to retain the Financial Resilience Designated Reserve, which provides some headroom for the Trust to continue existing levels of work whilst we incur deficit budgets until a break-even position can once again be resumed. At the year end, Council also approved the creation of an additional designated fund to help support underpin the delivery of Strategy 2030. The financial outlook and unrestricted funds, including those designated funds, are being carefully considered and managed by Council in order to best support the Trust response within a post-COVID environment, as well as the cost of living crisis. The balance sheet remains strong. Trustees and staff continue to proactively manage the activities and finances of the Trust to achieve our long-term vision to advance the conservation of Scotland's biodiversity for the benefit of present and future generations. This would not be possible, as Linda said, without the continued support from our members, our funders and our supporters, to whom we remain very grateful. So a big thank you from me and the rest of the staff.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you for setting that out so clearly. If you do have any questions for Susan, please hold them over until after our Chief Executive has spoken. But overall, it is a pleasing situation in comparison with what we thought the situation might have been this time last year. So it is a pleasure to report where we are to the membership at this stage. Thank you, Susan. Our next formal item is to reappoint the auditors. Chain and Tate audited the Trust for the first time this year, and a comprehensive audit findings report was provided to the Finance and Audit Committee and subsequently to Council. The audit went smoothly and no cause for concern was highlighted. We were provided with assurance that the finances continue to be very well managed, and we are grateful for Susan and her team for her work in that area. We therefore propose the appointment of Chain and Tate for a second year. If members are happy with that, can I request a proposer for this appointment? Craig has said, I haven't got a second name, but Craig is happy to propose, and Jane Stewart Smith, I think, will be happy to second. Thank you for that. So now I turn formally to the results of the council elections. This year, there were 2 vacancies on council, and we received 2 nominations. Firstly, Jen Baxter. Jen is a program manager who's worked in the change environment for over 20 years. In that, she encourages others to reconnect with nature. And she has said that she will continue this as a trustee. with her personal interest in encouraging deeper connections between people and wildlife. The second nomination is Hayley White. Hayley has worked in various marketing roles and in her current position is working primarily on communicating sustainability commitments across the UK. Her primary focus, again, is engaging with people and taking them on a journey towards mindsets and behaviours that improve sustainability. And she'd be very pleased to spend her time and skills in helping the Trust deliver its strategy. So as the number of individuals standing for election is equal to the number of vacancies, both the individuals standing for election are therefore elected to council. So congratulations to both and a very warm welcome to our new members of council. I very much look forward to working with you both, and thank you also to all the individuals who are continuing on council for your continued and much valued support. So Hayley has said she's looking forward to it. So thank you very much for that, Hayley. We've had no notification of any other relevant business. So I'm therefore formally closing the 2022 annual general meeting. It's a slightly shorter AGM than normal because there was less formal business than we have sometimes had in the past. So thank you for your forbearance on that. So I'm now going to hand over to our Chief Executive, Jo Pike, and she's going to share with us some thoughts on the future. As we've mentioned, the strategy has figured large in our thinking, and you've been involved in that, and I'm sure that will be coming forward. After Jo speaks, there'll be the opportunity for questions across the range of activities of the Trust. So if you do have questions, then be ready to come forward with those at the end of Jo's presentation. Over to you, Jo.
Thank you very much, Linda, and it's really good to be here with everybody today. I'm going to spend a few minutes looking ahead in the context of our new strategy 2030. And when I look to the future, it seems to me that we live in an age of contradictions. First of all, there are contradictions in time. We know that nature restoration frequently takes decades, and we need to align our aspirations, our visions, our plans with that reality. And yet we also need to focus attention on the immediate future, especially the decade on ecosystem restoration, if we're to avoid tipping points from which it would be very hard to recover. There are also contradictions in scale. We know that for ecosystems to be resilient, we need spaces for nature to be bigger and better and more joined up. But we also need to notice the little things. Nature is about place, even if that place is as small as a window box, and every place is different. Finally, there are contradictions in speed. We know we need to go faster in tackling the nature and the climate crises, which are inextricably linked. But at the same time, we need to slow down, pause and find opportunities for people to reconnect with nature and rethink our fast-paced modern lifestyle that has done so much to contribute to the degradation of the natural world. So what does that look like in practice? I just wanted to spend a few minutes sharing with you just a few examples of work that is on the horizon that I hope will illustrate how we're going to be delivering the goals in our new strategy 2030. So the first of our goals in strategy 2030, if I can get this slide to advance, is all about wildlife reserves, which have always been at the heart of everything that we do. So we want our wildlife reserves to have directly contributed to nature's recovery, of course. What does that look like? Well, here's an example coming up. This is Dulleter Marsh, where we're going to be doing some habitat enhancement. We'll be restoring some heavily grazed areas of this site of special scientific interest to create wet woodland, oak and birch woodland, and open water habitat. And if you're wondering what that might look like, then eventually we hope it might look something like this. Meanwhile, we know that climate change is going to have a huge impact on the wildlife, on our reserves and beyond. And we need to get much better at understanding exactly what these impacts are likely to be. So this is Alloa Inches, where we're going to be doing some work and options appraisal to help us better understand what those likely impacts are and which interventions are going to be most effective for us to take. Also on the horizon, we've been successful in securing some funding from the Nature Restoration Fund to do more peatland restoration. This is Bankhead Moss, where we'll be restoring about 7.5 hectares of peatland, involving techniques such as ditch reprofiling, bunding, as well as light scrub control and bracken control. And the Trust has a long history in peatland restoration, which is a massively important part of mitigating the impacts of climate change. This lovely image is from No Top Lochs in Dumfriesshire, where it's an example of some access work which is coming up. We'll be installing 2 small bridges to ensure that safe access is maintained, as well as upgrading sections of the boardwalk there. So the second of our big 5 goals is that by 2030, we want communities across Scotland to be taking action for nature in an increasingly diverse collective effort in which everyone can play their part. Now, you've heard Linda talking about the Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels project and the work we've been doing over the last few years, engaging communities in that work, which has been very successful. But we're now embarking on a 2-year transition phase to look at how we can build on that work, but also mainstream the conservation of this iconic species by protecting core red squirrel populations across strategically prioritised areas of Scotland. And that will also involve some advocacy work. And we have a new species advocacy officer who's going to be helping with that. This project called Next Door Nature is really exciting and brand new. It's part of a collaboration across the Wildlife Trusts movement, and it's funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Next Door Nature is going to enable us to reach new audiences in new places, and it will involve a community leadership programme, for example, as well as a digital nature recovery showcase, focusing in particular on people facing socioeconomic and other barriers to inclusion. Now, goal 3 is all about catalysing large-scale change through collaborative and pioneering initiatives to restore ecosystems on land and sea. And you'll be familiar with our existing living landscapes, which is part of that. A newer initiative is Riverwoods, which Linda has already mentioned. So Linda referred to the Investment Readiness Pioneers funding, which we got earlier in this year. What we have also just fairly recently received a successful notification about is funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to deliver what will be a £3 million project. We've just got the development funding for that to plan partnership work that will see us restore river woodlands, engaging communities, and create a centre of excellence for Riverwoods with a skills building programme and a Riverwoods showcase. And that vision is a Scotland-wide vision of healthy, resilient river systems and a thriving network of riverbank woodlands, which is attracting a lot of interest and attention from all sorts of places, which is great to see. Over on the Ayrshire coast, more work about habitat connectivity. We aim to add 35 more sites to the Irvine to Girvan Nectar Network, which you saw from Linda as well. That will result in almost 16 hectares of additional pollinator habitat, which is fantastic. Now, in our living landscapes, we're in a kind of transition period because we're nearing the end or have just completed the end of certain funding phases. This is Cumbernauld, this is Luggy Bank. We're hoping to extend some of the Creating Natural Connections work in Cumbernauld in the immediate future, and then there are conversations about what the next big chapter of that initiative will look like. The immediate future work will also involve Cumbernauld Glen, Seafar Woods and Forest Wood. I love this picture of a badger in Edinburgh. So again, building on the work that Linda mentioned around the Edinburgh Nature Network, we've been successful in securing some more money from the Future Parks Accelerator Fund. They tell us they absolutely love the work that we've been doing in Edinburgh in partnership with the City of Edinburgh Council. So the next stage, which will shortly begin, will actually pilot some of those interventions that we've identified to help nature be bigger, better and more joined up in the city. And there's huge potential for this to be scaled up across Scotland. Local authorities are looking to create nature networks to meet the Scottish Government's aspiration that every one of them will have something in place by 2026, which is not far away. Finally, our biggest living landscape initiative up in the northwest of Scotland, the Coire Canascent Living Landscape, which Linda mentioned, is now looking to the future and undertaking some really interesting discussions with local community partners in the context of a wider initiative called Northwest 25. So watch this space to define the next chapter in the living landscape, but we've got some really strong foundations to build on there. Meanwhile, our Living Seas programme, which encompasses a combination of advocacy work and also community engagement, will see us seek to influence the development of highly protected marine areas, and we also want to see proper management that will deliver the outcomes that everybody wants to see with across our whole marine protected areas network. We'll be engaging with influencers and decision makers around aquaculture. So salmon farming is huge in Scotland and there are aspirations to grow this enormously. There are, some very serious impacts that need to be mitigated. So it's absolutely crucial that dialogue takes place about how we can limit the harmful effects of expansion of that particular part of the economy and of course others. So Linda mentioned the snorkel trails. If you're wondering which ones are due to come next, the Torridon Snorkel Trail is next on the list. That's due to be launched later this year. And we're continuing to work on trails or potential trails in Orkney, the Moray Firth and Fife, and hope to launch at least 2 next year, 2023. So the fourth and final of the external goals within our Big Five is that we want Scotland to be recognised internationally for the part it has played in the UN's Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And for that to happen, we really need to work towards a nature positive economy. I was at an event recently where Ross Johnson from the Scottish Government acknowledged the pivotal role that the Scottish Wildlife Trust has played in getting Scotland and the Scottish Government's current policies to the stage that they're currently at. So there are really positive aspirations within the National Strategy for Economic Transformation, but we now need obviously to turn that into reality. So advocacy on the reform of agricultural payments is one very important part of that. We'll also be advocating the large-scale uptake of urban nature-based solutions, and that will include heavily advocating, as I mentioned, for the creation of nature networks along the lines of what we've been doing in Edinburgh across all local authorities in Scotland. Now, if Scotland is really to become recognised for its leadership role, we need a fantastic Scottish biodiversity strategy, which is currently being developed, and that needs to be properly resourced. So there's a big global nature summit, which is taking place in Montreal in December. We'll use that opportunity to really focus minds on the importance of the Scottish biodiversity strategy. And as Linda said earlier on, we've succeeded, along with colleagues in Scottish Environment Link, in getting the commitment to nature targets. Now we need the actual nature targets to be developed. The work that we've been doing on nature finance through the Scottish Forum on Natural Capital and the Scottish Nature Finance Pioneers continues to grow, and we've got some more funding from the Esme Fairbairn Foundation to employ a network coordinator for the very first time, and that network, which is already over 300 people, is going to see an increasing number of communities engaging with that work, investors engaging with that work, and really looking to build momentum for new ways of financing nature recovery in Scotland. And finally, by 2030, we need our foundations to be, you know, stronger and more resilient than they've ever been. And this encompasses everything else from fundraising and HR and cybersecurity and all sorts of things. But it also includes our knowledge and evidence work, which will be really crucial. So as part of our efforts to ensure these strong foundations, we'll collect, generate and make the best possible use of data, information, evidence and knowledge. And I thought I would just show you one of the most basic forms of evidence, which is a before and after picture. Obviously, we will be putting in a lot of work thinking about a more strategic approach to this part of our work. But this is back on the Ayrshire coast. This is a before picture. So this is last November as part of the Irvine to Girvan Nectar Network. And this is the same spot in August this year, just to show you some of the impacts that our work is having on the ground, and indeed as part of that much bigger impact that all of you are making possible. So I would like to say a personal thank you to all of you for your support in helping to make this happen. And I will just close on a quote that arrived in my inbox last night from the head teacher of our son's school in an update. And it's this: "It's worth remembering that it is often the small steps, not the giant leaps, that bring about lasting change." And that is Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joan. What an excellent message. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we now move on to the question opportunity as part of the AGM. If you'd like to ask a question, I hope lots of people do, you need to go into the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. And if you have a look at that, once questions start to come in, if you would like to encourage a question to be answered, you have an opportunity to use the thumbs up to vote for that and to move it up the screen. But at the moment, we don't have any questions. So please do think of some questions for the senior staff team. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I'll just mention that it's been very much in our thoughts how we do AGMs and members' days in the future. And this year, for a number of reasons, we decided to continue with an online version, which is our third. And there are many advantages in the large numbers of people potentially able to attend. Our thoughts are that for future years, we'll move to a hybrid model where we will still allow remote participation, but also have an in-person event. So we are expecting to have a hybrid in-person plus remote AGM and Members' Day next year. And it will be great to actually be meeting up together again in person, which has not been possible for quite a few years. So there are a number of questions coming forward. I think the first one is from Jim Wilshire. Are there any plans to expand the SSRS programme within Perthshire? I think that's probably a question for Sarah.
Thank you, Linda, and thanks, Jim. Yeah, we currently are working in that area because obviously it touches on the Highland Line. So we have a vacant post, unfortunately, at the moment on that east side of the country for the project, but we are looking at how we continue that work beyond what we're currently in, which is the transition phase between the large project that was developing community action through to something that uses all of our learning from that project and make sure it's applied throughout various partner organisations, and including contributions and input from ourselves to sort of continue the work, mainly focused on grey squirrel control in that Highland Line area, because it's so important for red squirrel conservation. So we are, yeah, we're not looking at sort of expanding greatly in the short term, but we are seeking to maintain and continue the work that's needed along the Highland Line and in Perthshire.
Thank you. Next, we have a question also, I think, for Sarah, and it's about how we work with other organisations such as the butterfly conservation, BBCT, etc.? How do we work with the Scottish branches of other nature conservation organisations?
I think the main way is through Scottish Environment Link, but that tends to be on the sort of more policy and advocacy side of our work. But that doesn't exclude us working quite closely on very practical measures in many of our partnership projects and on our reserves. So some of the pictures you saw today, and Linda mentioned the butterfly surveys and some of the work that we've been doing on Rahoy Hills, and that's very much in conjunction with butterfly conservation here in Scotland. So it's multiple and many the ways I think that we probably work with the wider community of conservation organisations, because we commonly and more often than not work in partnership with people to achieve some of the work on the ground and in that sort of advocacy policy space as well.
I mean, if I could comment from a chair's perspective, certainly for me, it's been very obvious that the whole ethos of the trust is about partnership working and working with those who have relevant expertise and knowledge and practical know-how. And it is totally intrinsic to the way that we do things across a huge range of work. And I think it's such a positive aspect of the whole culture of the Scottish Wildlife Trust. Any further questions? Well, while we're waiting, I'd be interested, Sarah, in hearing just a bit more about beavers. And it was mentioned how we're involved. Obviously, seeing the beaver population expand and grow and do the things that beavers do so well is a huge part of our hope for the future of the beaver population in Scotland. Could you tell us where we are on making that a reality?
Certainly, yeah. No, I mean, recent events with the death of the Queen have delayed the release of the beaver strategy, but we expect after the funeral that the strategy for Scotland will be published, and everybody should look out for that on the Nature Scot website. That will be the first place it appears, but there'll be associated sort of press to signpost you to that. And that has been a huge amount of work, bringing together all sorts of people who are very positive about beavers' presence in Scotland, and also many people who are less welcoming of them or are suffering, in fact, from some of the challenges that they present. So we've been on the organising group for that strategy planning process and played a key role in developing the strategy. And I would say what we're looking to do once that's launched is identify where we can make the biggest difference in using our knowledge and expertise from the Scottish Beaver Trial and the Reinforcement Project to realise more gains for beavers in Scotland. And we are fully supporting the change that was announced at the end of last year by the Minister around the translocations being able to go wider than the current range of the beavers. So I think we're looking where we can at what that means for our reserves. We obviously host, many of you all know, beavers on a number of our reserves already, but we do commonly get asked and receive a lot of interest in how people could realise a beaver translocation. So we're looking at how we best support that once the strategy's been published in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you, Sarah. So turning to some questions for other folk, we have a question from Stuart Smith asking if we can summarise where the trust is with the Living Seas campaign. That's for Ruchia.
Yeah, I mean, on the Living Seas, you've heard about a number of our activities that we've been doing, like the snorkel trails, for example, which were in the slide set. We've also been engaging with the World Oceans Day and the Sea Scotland Conference activities, and of course with National Marine Week. One of the, in addition to the webinars we've been holding, one of the areas that we've been particularly focused on is developing a co-design engagement model where public engagement staff and volunteers and others can share their expertise. And we've also been building on work we've done in Orkney, specifically around working with the local communities there, using particular methodologies, and that approach is being now converted into various case study resources that we can share more widely. In terms of the development of the Living Seas campaign and projects more broadly, we are in a little bit of a transition phase at the moment, and you'll notice that the Scottish Wildlife Trust is currently recruiting for a Living Seas manager, as well as a marine policy officer. So there's a little bit of transition going on at the moment. So activity is going to ramp up very soon once those people are in post as well.
And there was another question that's come through on the chat, actually, rather than the Q&A, but it's also on marine. Could we explain the difference between a highly protected MPA and an MPA?
So a highly protected marine area is a subset of a marine protected area. It's a subset of category. And what it means is that with a highly protected marine area, it's the strictest possible environmental protections. In highly protected areas, you can't do any damaging activities. Only swimming, scuba diving, activities like that are allowed. There can't be any fishing, construction, digging, or anything like that, which is possible in the wider marine protected areas, although monitoring is a bit more intense than in non-marine protected areas. So basically the difference is it's just a lot more stricter, and you can't really do any damaging activities in those areas. Unfortunately, I don't have any statistics on the percentage of marine protected that is highly marine protected, but that's certainly something that we can provide later.
Thank you. Moving on to more questions about the sort of trust as an organisation. Colin Brown has asked, and 3 people had supported this, how many members are there, and what are the demographics in terms of age and area distribution? I'm not sure that we ask people their age when they join, so I'm not sure if we're able to answer this question fully. Jo, who's best to answer this one?
I can address it, but I think Susan is probably best placed to do that.
Yeah, so we have, what have we got? We've got memberships, we've got 22,905 memberships, and 23,070 memberships and 41,050 members. And in terms of demographics, you're right, Linda, age is difficult as we don't require people to provide that information. From what we know, members are weighted to 50 plus. In terms of geographical area, we tend to be weighted towards, we are predominantly Scottish, but focused around where the areas of populations are. So very much sort of central belt, perhaps weighted towards the east of Scotland around the Edinburgh area. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour of where we are.
And perhaps also looking at our organisation, Roy Sexton has asked for an update on the status of local Scottish Wildlife Trust groups. Again, I think that's maybe for Ruchia, unless Jo wants to chip in.
Yeah, I mean, I can give a start on that one. So we have around 20 local groups across Scotland, all the way from Inverness down to Dumfries and Galloway. Most of them have continued successfully to stay active during the pandemic period. And a lot of them shifted their engagement to online in terms of the kind of talks and things they gave, which were extremely successful. We were getting up to 700 people coming to some of these online talks. But now that activities resumed, there's been a number of local walks that have been organised and so on. But I think the local groups want to continue having a mix of both online and offline activities now, which is great to see. We have unfortunately had the closure of one local group in Arran. Sorry, not Arran, in Skye. But apart from that, most of the local groups have continued. We are continuing to foster new ways of engaging and support local groups to engage in new ways, particularly with those communities who might not normally connect with their local groups in the area. And our Next Door Nature program, which Jo mentioned, is going to play a part in supporting that as well. So yeah, I don't know, Jo, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Not really, other than just to say that every local group is different, and there's so much fantastic work happening across those local groups. We've got active planning volunteers in some areas that are using their expertise to target local planning applications that might be damaging to nature. We've got some local groups that are doing work with schools. We've got, you know, lots of practical work that is done, and some local groups sort of more connected into wildlife watch groups than others. I think the Next Door Nature opportunity is a great one to build on. And as we look for new ways of people becoming involved, when we know that all charities are finding it challenging to get office bearers, for example, you know, people don't necessarily always have the time or inclination to sign up as treasurers and committee secretaries and that kind of thing. So we need to just find new ways of making sure there's a full range of opportunities to engage people on their terms.
Yes, I mean, I'm always struck by just the achievements and variety of so many of the local groups. And we will be hearing some more when we come on to the volunteer awards later on in the agenda. We'll be hearing some detail of some of the very special work that's being done there through the local groups. So thank you for that. We have another Red Squirrel question, so one for Sarah. With Red Squirrel project in Tayside, this comes from Janice Wilshire. Is there any plan for more community-led action like elsewhere? And Janice says that she volunteers with this, I'm assuming in Tayside, if I've picked that up right. So a specific question about, will there be community-led action on red squirrels in Tayside?
Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Janice, for volunteering. That's great. Yeah, no, the community-led action has focused very heavily on the south of Scotland during the Developing Community Action project over the last 5 years, but that hasn't precluded the development of more community-led action in other areas. I think what we've done is probably tailored our activity to try and sort of suit the needs of the landscape and the sort of priority of the work. So obviously we've got a real need to sort of close down the satellite population of grey squirrels up in the northeast and defend the Highland Line, and they're two really key activities for red squirrel conservation in Scotland. And so that's where we've been putting effort through staff resource, as opposed to sort of seeking to deliver that entirely through community action or largely through community action like we have in the south. But yeah, no, I know that the previous post holder, Anne-Marie in Tayside, was developing community groups that could help continue the work and contribute to the work that we recognise needs to continue as well, with staff, employed staff, to sort of defend the Highland Line. So hopefully there'll be opportunities for people to engage in Tayside from the community, but also that we will be seeking to work with partners again to defend the Highland Line with staff as well.
Thank you for that. There's another question that's been posted in the chat, which I think is quite interesting. It's asking, is Stephen Hull, and he's expressing concerns about, or it's just come up in Q&A as well, is expressing concern about garden bird food and asking for recommendations for plants to leave to seed for birds in the winter, cultivated and wild plants, recommendations that presumably someone might grow in order to reduce the dependency on purchasing garden bird food. So quite a specific question. I wonder if there's any ideas there, Sarah.
Yeah, I think we could possibly come back to you with some specific suggestions, but I would say that we tend to support trying to create natural habitat as opposed to sort of feeding, although, you know, we do that as well, of course, and we understand the engagement that provides. So yeah, we could probably come back to you with some links and some suggestions of wild plants that you could look to put into your garden or local area to support birds.
Thank you. And Susan has just posted in the chat, top 10 plants for birds. Please have a look at that, if you would. if you're wanting to follow up more on this topic. Okay, I'm not seeing many more questions, and we are reaching nearly the time for our next break. We have one comment about just querying whether people are vegan or not, which I'm sure many people are, but not actually a question there. Any final questions before we stop for our break? No, well, in that case, I think we will stop at this point. The program from here on in is we'll take a comfort break, give people a chance to get a cup of tea. When we come back, we will have the announcement of the outcome of the volunteering awards, where we have a number of very delightful awards to make, and then we'll move into our panel discussion. We'll be looking in more detail on the topic of nature and peace, which is certainly an interesting one, I think, for discussion later on. So we'll switch off our cameras now and resume at 11:30. See you then. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. There's a dog barking outside. It's not my dog, so I'm not sure if you can hear that or not, but hopefully it will stop soon. So we turn to the very pleasant job of announcing the outcome of the Trustees Awards for volunteering. These awards celebrate the broad range of activities carried out by our volunteers, whether it's running a local group committee, getting involved in planning, getting your hands dirty with nature conservation work, species work on reserves, organising the Junior Wildlife Watch, or taking part in it. A huge range of different activities that volunteers do to support the Trust's work. It's not so much a competition for the best volunteers, but it's an opportunity for staff, for members, for other volunteers to nominate groups and individuals who they would like to see recognised for their very valuable contribution. And speaking as a trustee, it's one of the very most enjoyable tasks that we do, to read the nominations and determine who should be awarded the awards. This year, the judging panel was led by our Trust Vice Chair for Groups and Wildlife Watch, Dr. Tim Duffy. And we had 4 categories. We had the Young Volunteer, the Group Award, the Species Champion, and the Lifetime Achievement. So I'll start with the Young Volunteer Award. The winner of the Young Volunteer Award, I'm very pleased to announce, is Charlie Drapala. Charlie is one of our young leaders and has been since 2018. She has promoted the Trust work both in person and online, and has been involved in projects that I've mentioned earlier on, championing our wildlife politically and amongst the wider public. She's also been a strong advocate for inclusion and accessibility, and has approached each project with great enthusiasm and thoughtfulness. Congratulations to Charlie. Moving on to the Group Award, we had a very, very large number of nominations for the Group Award, and it was difficult to choose from amongst the nominations, but in the end, we settled on Castle Milk Explorers as the winner of the Group Award. Castle Milk Explorers are led by Stuart Whittaker, and they're based in Glasgow's Castletown area. They're a brilliant representation of the ethos of Wildlife Watch, and they provide fun and varied activities for children who are less likely to have the opportunities to engage with the natural world. So we're delighted that we've been able to celebrate their contribution in this way by presenting the Castle Milk Explorers with the Group Award. Then Our next category is the Species Champion. And the winner of the Species Champion, I'm pleased to announce, is Charles Darling. Charlie has been volunteering for the Trust since 2006, and he has been responsible for processing species records, which is maybe a sort of a rather unloved task by others. He has personally digitized and uploaded 121,000 records and collected nearly 7,000 of his own. We are hugely in his debt, and this has given us the most valuable database of information about the species that we're protecting in our reserves, which we really need to properly manage them. So a huge thank you to Charlie, and it's a great honour to acknowledge and celebrate the work that he has done as our Species Champion. Turning to the Lifetime Achievement Awards, I have two awards to mention here. Mary and Tom Harwood have been involved with the Dundee's The Mowley Wildlife Reserve since its inception in 1992. And they have taken on a huge range of roles, from organising litter picks to fundraising and engaging with local children. Their dedication to sharing this particular green space and protecting it and enhancing it has been truly inspirational, and a big thank you to them both. But I also wish to highlight now that we have early in the summer presented to Alan Bantic a special Lifetime Achievement Award. Alan chaired the Scottish Wildlife Trust between 2008 and 2014 and was a very well-loved figure across the world of nature conservation through his passion for nature and his active involvement in numerous initiatives. And I have certainly valued, I know Alan is on the call now, I've certainly valued your support, Alan, so thank you. The many achievements include being the first chair of the Scottish Beaver Trial, which I know he's very proud of, in which the Trust was one of two leader partner organisations alongside the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, which was the first ever formal scientific trial reintroduction of a mammal to the UK. And its successful conclusion led a few years later to the confirmation in Scotland of the protected species status for this unique ecosystem engineer. So a huge thank you to Alan, and we're very delighted to be able to commemorate his work and that of Mary and Tom Harwood, awarding them all the Lifetime Achievement Award. Thank you all for your major contribution. I hope in what we've covered this morning, we've demonstrated that the Trust is in good health. We've covered the finance, we've set out what the Trust is achieving and what our ambition is, our strategy is going forward. And we've encountered the stories of the volunteers and the expertise and commitment that they've put in. So overall, faced with this huge challenge, I think the Trust is in good health to move forward. And thank you all very much for attending today's formal review of the Trust and its governance. Thank you to Joe and the team for all the work in putting the event together. As I said, I hope to see you all in person next year, when I will be handing over the reins to a new chair for the Trust. But in the meantime, we have a huge challenge to take forward. And thank you so much for your support in ensuring that we can make the best job we can in these current challenging circumstances. Thank you.